We have removed the head of a demonic regime, an absolutely evil regime. The people of Iran are rife for taking over and for taking back control of their country. And what's super interesting, God has been laying the foundation in Iran with the building of the Iranian church. Now, good morning. Welcome to Life in the Markets. My name's Tim Russell, and I'm joined by Stephen Rohr this morning. And today is March 2nd, 2026. There's been a lot going on in the news, so let me just get through some of the numbers, reviewing what happened over the past week. The short version of the longer story is not a lot. A lot down, a lot up. We ended the end of the week largely mixed. So the S&P 500 down about 0.25%. The equal weighted S&P 500 up about 0.75%. So we see the further disconnection between all of the companies in the S&P weighted equally versus letting the major tech-oriented companies rule the return within the regular S&P 500. It's almost a full percentage point difference between the two. The NASDAQ was slightly positive for the week. The Russell 2000 was down about 0.3%, 0.29. International stocks were positive about 0.5%. Gold, silver, oil, Bitcoin, all up over the past week. Gold was up 2.4, silver up 7.6. Oil up almost 2.6%, and Bitcoin was up 1.26%. All of that on the backdrop of bonds actually doing really well. So the aggregate bond was up about 0.4%, which for a bond in the bond world, that's like meaningful moves within a week. It just think about it this way: the bond market moved up more than the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Russell 2000. It's pretty remarkable. It really is. All right. So the aggregate bonds, generally positive. High yield bonds had a little bit of a rough week. They were down about 0.3%. And all of the comments about the aggregate bonds are probably tied to the reality that the 10-year Treasury is now at 3.95, which is sharply lower. In bond world, in the 10-year Treasury in particular, that's a meaningful move lower over just 1 week. Now, let me get to the crux of what I want to talk about today, because there's been a ton that's happened over the last 2 weeks. Now, 2 weeks ago, we didn't have a week ago, we didn't have our normal video because of some weather-related issues here in Pennsylvania. So let's just review. Now that we're at the end, we finished February. We're 17% of the way, 18% of the way through the year, which is remarkable, 1/6 of the way through the year. In the last 2 weeks, there have been at least 5 major news stories that certainly are moving markets or have the potential of moving markets. So we've got the Supreme Court decision to overturn the Trump tariffs.
Big deal.
We've got the inflation ticking higher, but employment actually is remaining resilient in spite of all of that. We've got a war breaking out between Pakistan and Afghanistan. This is not getting as much maybe news or attention as perhaps it should, but that's a significant conflict. We also now have the United States and Israel attacking Iran, have taken out their supreme leader, and have laid the groundwork for the nation of Iran to actually take back its country from totalitarianism and from some of its evil dictatorial controls. You might get a sense, I actually think that's a really good thing for the entire Middle East. It's a good thing for America, and it's a really good thing for Iran. And then probably related to this, there was a terrorist attack or a suspected terrorist attack in the United States, Austin, Texas, where a guy who came over from Senegal, it was a naturalized immigrant from Senegal, ended up attacking and shooting a number of people in Austin before he was killed by police officers. A lot of things that are going on that are at least attention worthy. In reality, look, news can move the markets. As I write this here on Saturday or Sunday night, as I was writing this article, it was really too early to tell exactly what was going to happen with the stock markets and this whole Iran situation.
Is, really.
Well, it still is, but we can tell this morning as we got in, we started looking at what the futures are doing. It's not looking really good. Do you have any thoughts or observations about what we saw this morning?
Yeah, absolutely. So far, oil is up, gold is up. No great shock on either of those.
We'd expect that.
Brent crude, is up crude oil is up about 9%, topped $80 a barrel for that measure.
Yeah, interestingly, it hit a high and now it seems to be coming down. Again, all of this is super early. Like, who knows what it's going to be at the end of the day? The futures usually tell us what direction it's going to open, but it doesn't tell you how it's going to end.
Correct. Even within the day, let alone the week or the month. So also, stock futures are down a bit, which, again, not surprising on the news that a new conflict that the U.S. is majorly involved in has broken out.
And bonds. We were looking at bonds
are even
earlier.
down a bit.
Yeah.
That was surprising.
Yeah. So aggregate bonds, high yield bonds, all kind of showing some initial sell-off. Not sell-off, that's an overstatement. Initial selling activity this morning. So, again, stuff to pay attention to watch. I bring that up because I want to make a point. We have a news-driven potential market event, right? If the markets open up and everything starts to sell off, if everything starts to drift lower throughout the day because of uncertainty in Iran, I need you to know, and we've said this before on previous Life in the Markets episodes, that news-driven market events tend to revert in the primary direction within a couple days or weeks of the event.
Right.
Can I translate that in English? Stock markets generally going up. We have a news-driven market event that forces the stock market down because of uncertainty. That is a break of the primary trend, the primary trend being upwards. If the stock market goes down because of news, as we get more information, digest the news, stop having knee-jerk reactions, people start seeing opportunities to get in and buy, we are finding normally the stock market does tend to recover over time. We saw this with Trump's Liberation Day reaction,
That's
right?
a big one.
When we had in April of last year, the stock market had a really hard sell-off, and a week later, Trump kind of dialed back some of his rhetoric, and the stock market went on a really nice rally and recovery. We saw this during COVID. We saw this during, you name the thing. The U.S. loses its AAA rating. There are all these different things that happen. They're news-oriented. They're newsworthy. But at the end of the day, they don't actually change the fundamental health of the economy. The market will revert back into its primary direction before too long. So what I'd like for you to do is take a big, deep breath and say, well, I don't know the outcome of this particular story. I do have a reason for confidence that the world's not coming to an end. The stock market's going to continue to do what it does. We'll be okay. Now, at the same time, I have to say, my compliance office would love for you to know that past performance is no guarantee of future results, and this is true. They say that for a reason. All investing involves risk. Absolutely true. That just because the stock market recovered in the past doesn't guarantee it's going to recover every single time. Technically true. But here's the thing I also need you to know. Past performance is the only real metric I have to judge or assess what is a likely outcome in the future as we progress. So while we don't have our confidence built upon necessarily past performance, it is indicative of the kinds of things that we might see. And you'll notice here, I use words like might and probably rather than absolutely or guaranteed, right? We don't know the future any better than you do. All right. That being said, there's another major shift that's facing the markets just in the first 2 months of this year. We have seen a massive move away from growth, technology, AI, speculation into value, dividends, and international. Value, dividends, and international. You probably saw in the numbers that I shared just a little bit ago, the S&P was, the S&P 500 was down slightly this past week. On a year-to-date basis, the S&P 500, flat, 0.01% positive for the year. It's flat. The S&P hasn't done much of anything. The S&P equal-weighted S&P is up 6.64%. So what that tells us is there is a shift away from major growth, a little bit more towards value. That's super interesting. We also see this with dividends. Many dividend strategies are showing returns somewhere between 6 and 8, 6 and 11% year to date. Because dividends are real income. Companies have to operate their balance sheets and their profit and loss in such a way to make the dividend possible. Therefore, we're watching these dividend players show some real substantial value. Again, just because we're seeing it for the first couple weeks or months of this year doesn't mean that that's how the year is going to end, but it is a trend that's worth watching.
Right. I mean, even with NVIDIA, their recent earnings report came out great.
Yeah,
really well.
Really interesting comment.
Really well.
Yes.
But the price of the shares hardly changed because that
they dropped.
Yeah, even dropped a little because it's already baked in. That's what everyone is depending on. They're depending on the earnings reports doing exactly great. Like that's already why it's priced so high. So it has to do astronomically well to exceed the expectations that people already have priced in.
No, that's absolutely the factor. So specifically with NVIDIA, they had a 75% revenue growth, and they projected like an 80% revenue growth in the future. This is already the biggest company in the world. The biggest company to have a 70% revenue growth in one quarter or 1 year trailing is mind-boggling. And then for them to go out and say that they're going to have another 70% growth from here, and the stock sells off? Like, what? It just goes to show you that all of the things that got the stock market excited in the past are not necessarily the things that are driving the stock market in the present. So just take all of that in mind. Like, don't get overexcited about, AI or that aspect of the stock market. Look at it within its totality. Right now is not the time where those particular strategies are favored. Now, I will say it is probable that over the next year, we may see some significant selling in some of these AI aggregators, and it might create an opportunity to buy some of these companies at a good price.
Correct.
Just recognize some of them are going to do really well. Some of them are not. So you're taking a risk. So recognize the fact that your guess might not be accurate. All right.
Might not pick the winner.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Okay. So a couple more things. International has done really well. It's actually one of the big winners for markets this year. It is up almost 8.5%, a little bit more than 8.5% year to date. So we're seeing dividends, value, maybe even some small companies value, and we're seeing international perform really well. So what we're seeing, why I'm bringing this up, is there is a significant shift in what the market is favoring. This is certainly something to pay attention to. Now, one thing I do want to say is that this has been a really good thing for many of our Life Financial Group clients who are using our biblically responsible investment strategies. We're grateful for it because, frankly, over the last number of years, we've tended not to focus on some of the big AI names, some of the big technological names, for a variety of reasons. And what we're seeing is that that has caused us to, give up a couple percentage points of return in certain years. This year, it's actually putting us ahead of where the market has been behaving because we're not focused on just the S&P 500. It's actually worked out pretty well. Now, again, past performance is no guarantee of future results. It's certainly interesting to me and encouraging to me that this shift in the markets, shift in the dominance has been actually favorable for our clients in those biblically responsible portfolios.
Which again is a reminder, we were saying this a lot through the end of last year. Hey, look at the price to earnings valuations of these big AI companies.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable for that to continue to grow like that. But look at some of these value companies or these dividend companies, and they're actually undervalued.
Yeah.
And that's a good opportunity even to shift in and or stay consistent and not get distracted by the shiny, returns of the big companies. And it pays off. That's where looking at the fundamentals is so important and not letting, the excitement carry you away beyond where you actually, what you should actually be looking at.
So one more thing I want to share with you before we talk about Iran is this whole tariff, the Trump tariffs being overturned by the Supreme Court. Now, again, I mentioned we didn't have a video last week. This is something that we had some comments I shared with you in our email version of this video. So if you only watch us on YouTube, if you are not a subscriber to the Life Financial Group's newsletter, I know no one's dying to get on another newsletter, but I would go to our website. There's information in the show notes here for you to get access to our email version so that you get notified when we send out a video or when we only do a blog style posting for the week. Again, was weather related this most recent week. So get on to that. I think that'll be helpful for you. The thing I wanted to share with you is that, look, we stand behind our stance that tariffs are fundamentally bad for the U.S. economy. They're bad for the U.S. consumer. They raise the cost of living. Inflation does tend to increase. They leave our economy poorer because of tariffs. Tariffs are not an overall net positive to the economy. They are, frankly, a net negative to the economy. Now, one of the things that we see is that when the Supreme Court says, no, you can't use this particular rule to enact all of your tariffs, your justification's flawed, what they did not invalidate are all of the trade deals. Trump signs trade deals. Those trade deals are inked. Those are good. Those aren't going away. But Trump has come back and he's put a 10%. Some reports are talking about possibly a 15% across the board tariff to kind of respond to this. We're probably years away from figuring out, are there refunds? How do people get their money back? How is that all going to play out? There's lower courts are going to have to make decisions on that. The Supreme Court chose not to decide. So more to come on this.
Is so complicated because many of the companies that were affected by the tariffs just increased their prices to the consumer.
Yeah.
So the consumer is not getting a refund.
No, it would be the company. It would be the company itself that paid the tariff.
Right.
But companies don't pay the tariffs. It's those other countries that are paying the tariffs. Well, no, you and I, we're paying it. All right. Let me jump to the big news. This is probably what everyone's tuning in to find out about. The United States attacked Iran in conjunction with Israel. Stephen, thoughts?
Yeah. Well, it was February 28th, so 2 days ago now, that the U.S. and Israel announced, well, they didn't announce, they just struck.
They announced with the dropping of bombs.
Correct. And hit all sorts of targets. Evidently, the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, was killed. And that's a big deal.
Along with a lot of his leadership.
In addition to the ones that were, the ones that were already killed not too long ago.
Yes.
Yeah, last year there
Been
were
thinning out of the top ranks.
a lot of the military leaders were killed in a strike or two last year. So that is going to create a major vacuum. And whenever there is a power vacuum anywhere, you see new strife and rivalry as the people who now want to be at the top are struggling for supremacy. So just inherently, that's going to weaken Iran's response because they're going to be divided and there are going to be different factions struggling for supremacy. Not to mention, hopefully, this does give some breathing room and some opportunity for the Iranian people who have been protesting en masse the past, years, but particularly the past month or so. They've really been struggling hard, and they've been repressed violently to the tune of probably tens of thousands. We don't really know.
Some of the Iranians are saying upwards of 75,000 people have slaughtered by this regime.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, God gives human rights, right? Human rights aren't human rights because some court or some society decides these are human rights. Human rights come from God. We believe these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. So that's not an American thing. That's a human thing. And when Iran or any of these major organizations or countries choose to restrict God's rights that he endows humanity with, they put themselves at severe risk of legitimately being overthrown by their people for their evil acts. I entitled this particular video, the overthrowing of Iran and promoting virtue, possibly promoting virtue. And this is the thing that I get so excited about when I look at what's happening here. We have removed the head of a demonic regime, an absolutely evil regime. The people of Iran are rife for taking over and for taking back control of their country. And what's super interesting, God has been laying the foundation in Iran with the building of the Iranian church. Now, this has not gotten a lot of press, but I have a lot of friends who are in the region who are sharing with me that there is a revival movement that's happening in the entire country of Iran. People who are Muslim background coming to faith in Jesus Christ. Underground churches are exploding. There are people who are getting super excited about what God is doing in their country, seeing the evidence of God's work in their nation and in their people. For me, as an outsider, I look back at this and say, God is at work here. God is doing a thing in Iran. Iran used to be one of our greatest allies. They had a great haven for Christianity and a lot of religious freedoms. When the Shah and all of the nonsense came back in with the revolution back in the late 70s, early 80s, all of that got stripped away. And now we have the opportunity of instilling freedoms that could promote virtue and allow us to have a friend in the Middle East again in the country of Iran. That would be a tremendous outcome. And the freedom for the church to grow and expand, to me, is one of the most exciting things to watch. So pay attention to what God's doing in Iran. It is not simply a military act. It's not simply America and Israel didn't like the guy who's at the top of the stack. Yes, it was that. But God was at work, toppling regimes because he has a good plan for the nation of Iran, and God has a good plan for the world. So watch Iran and see what God will do. Now, with all of that being said, I just want to close our time today with looking at a couple verses from Psalm chapter 2. So verses 1 through 6, it says this: "Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart. Let us cast their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king in Zion, my holy hill." Right now, all that's going on is not really and purely ultimately a conflict between America and Iran. I need you to know God is at work in this. The nations of the world have set themselves up against God. Iran is one of them. And we are not in some kind of holy war mode. We're not trying to get back to the Crusades, but we do acknowledge that God is doing a thing. And God, in his providence and wisdom, has used the American and the Israeli governments to bring about a good, which is the toppling of an evil regime, for God's own mysterious purposes. And I get excited. I want you to get excited what God will do. And pray with me for righteous rulers to come and to rule over Iran. And that through that righteous rule, the church would flourish and justice would spread throughout the entire Middle East. Until next time, take care. God bless. Be safe in the markets.
The topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investing and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. All information herein is from sources believed reliable, but is not guaranteed for accuracy or completeness. The team assumes no liability for any errors, omissions, or actions taken based on this material. Information is as of the date stated and subject to change without notice. Securities and advisory services offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA and SIPC.